Ready?
Ready, Brandy, go ahead. It's all yours.
Okay. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, but we are on and ready to go. So I'm going to call this June 29th, 2021 work session to order. Can I get an approval of the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Katie. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right, I believe we're going into the maintenance agreement. Is that right?
Correct.
And Chris, that's you, right?
Yes, so this is real brief. This is I'm going to say boilerplate. It doesn't seem that way with all the legal language, but essentially what this is for any new construction projects, MSD requires that we create some sort of water retention area for stormwater. And that's what this is. This is an agreement that promises that we as a school district will maintain that watershed area for forever. And I think it even says forever in the legal language there, which is why I didn't feel comfortable with Roxana and me signing it. And I felt that it was, while a pretty standard agreement, it was something that the board should probably approve. So that's what this is. We'll be doing permeable pavers in certain areas within the courtyard, and we already have a maintenance area up in the parking lot. We have permeable asphalt up there and holding tanks. So this is really just to collect all the stormwater that's running down from the north.
Okay. And that is on our action items tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do we have a similar agreement on file from, obviously, I know water has been a challenge at most of the properties.
Yeah.
Is this new? Is this something we have?
So what's probably new is the fact that you're seeing it. Since I'm sort of keeping oversight over this whole construction project, I know we have Randy and he's doing a fantastic job, but I still have to maintain some degree of oversight even over him. Perhaps you just haven't been brought this document to approve before. And technically I probably don't need you to approve it. I just felt like it was prudent to have you approve it. So
okay.
That was my interpretation.
And was similar language in the previous agreement?
Indeed, yeah. And they are very good to send us reminders that we have to do our annual maintenance and send in the reports. So we have one of these at ECC and we have one existing here on the high school campus.
Okay.
I've not seen one for the elementary, but we do have a water retention area over there, which is that mulch field. But I don't know that we had to construct anything over there. I think it was just we had to leave that area vacant so that we could. So hence the low spot, swamp,
Okay. Did anyone else have any other questions about it? Okay. All right, Chris, you're up on finance as well.
All right. I have a lot of windows open. Can you tell me what my topic is?
Final budget amendment.
Final budget amendment. Okay, so this is that exciting time of year. I'm going to share my screen here, where we true up our revenues to be actual. And since the 29th, since we're right at the 29th, the end of the month, we are able to do that with certainty. We just did take final receipt of our state food service monies this morning. Actually, they were in the bank. So good timing on that. As soon as I find my Zoom window, I will share my screen. There it is. There we go. I'm gonna make sure I was sharing the right document. Okay, so I'll talk you through the general fund here quickly. So I'm adjusting down the local revenues. We're slightly under collected on county taxes, on local taxes. We also finished writing off the preschool program and food service programs. On county, we were a little bit over collected there, so we're adjusting that up by 33.6. States was also up a little bit, which is not exactly what we were expecting for this fiscal year. Federal, we're adjusting down, and that's because we've not yet been able to take receipt of our ESSER 2 funds. We've had an error in our system that has not Well, until we fix that error, I'm not comfortable drawing down those funds because those have to be exact numbers. So we're working with our software vendor to get those squared away. Luckily, we're able to draw those down in the next fiscal year and recognize them on the prior year. That's one of the things that the ESSER allows us to do. So while it creates a little bit more work for us, I'd rather do it right than force it and have to fix it later. Then on salaries, these are just adjustments based on how things are landing. Salaries and benefits, purchase services. I wanted to, if I was going to be writing off that revenue, I also wanted to write off in kind the purchase services and supplies so that we didn't totally whack out the budget. It is just a budget. So I know you all understand that the budget and actual are very different things. But there's no reason to create these drastic swings up and down. So what I chose to do on purchase services and supplies, we did this last year too. I wrote off the expenditures for the expeditions, except for those that we've expended. The Gulf trip, as well as the Smoky Mountains trip, those are significant expenses. I wrote those off. I also wrote off food service because that fell in line with some of the federal revenues that I wrote off. So I tried to find the equivalent expenditure offset, and that landed us. I'm not ready to talk about fund balance yet. So that was just an increase of the budget here, $116,000, all said and done. But again, I still have to recognize about $500,000 in federal revenue that we've not yet been able to realize. Hoping we can get that done in the next week or two. Moving on to the special revenue fund, which is the teachers fund. Again, we're writing off some of this revenue here. We are writing off, which is sales tax. Then we're writing off some of the federal revenues there. And just slight increases in purchase services and supplies, and decreases in benefits, nothing in supplies. Debt service fund, again, we're just adjusting for the changes in our tax collections. County, we're adjusting for those changes. Everything here mirrors what you saw in the general fund with regard to local, county, state, and federal. And no changes on the expense side on debt service. Of the things that we budget and expend our resources on, debt service is one that we have to the penny, at almost all times. Capital projects. Again, we do put 10 cents of our tax levy directly to our capital projects fund. That helps us out a little bit because we do have transfer limits from our general fund to our capital projects fund. So this helps us keep a little bit of revenue generation going on so that we don't need to transfer nearly as much. So again, these will track with our local tax revenues. County, we wrote off the county receipts that we budgeted but did not receive. And then other, that's anything that didn't fit in these other categories here, slight write-offs there. And then we wrote off some of the capital outlay. That brings us to our bond funds. So again, the way we budget our bond funds is we just budget everything that we have in the balance. So we do that every fiscal year until the bond funds are expended. So when I show you the budget in a little bit, you'll see bond funds somewhere around 25 million, just under 26 million, because that's the amount of balance that we have left to spend on that. So this is just making a slight adjustment to the revenue, which is interest. Because interest rates were in the tank. I don't need to tell all of you that. Sorry, sneak peek at my notes there. We wrote off that revenue. Now, this is the one that's always a little bit strange because it includes the bond funds, which it really gives a skewed perspective on the budget. So this is everything that we've already talked to in one look. If I switch over to this one, this is all of our funds all of our funds except for our bond funds. And you can see after all those changes that we just discussed briefly, our fund balance as a percentage of our expenditures has remained at that 38.5% as we've been budgeting for the majority of the year. And again, this is budget. I will tell you that we ended up on an actual fund balance percentage much better than this. I will be happy to share that with you at our July meeting. But that will make our outlook for the following couple of years much better than what I'm showing you tonight in the budget. So in the fiscal 22 budget. And then what you don't want to see, which I have included in the document, is, let me make this a little bit smaller. And you're getting the way I look at it, not the presentation here. So let me get rid of my formulas there. This is all the backup for everything that I just showed you. So essentially I've included the entire general ledger with the over under, and I did that to capture any changes that we've made to our budget over the year. So anything above the blue line is our revenues, everything below the blue line is our expenses. And as I scroll through here, you can see that we move from Fund 1. I can find a faster way to do this. Fund 2, which is our teachers fund. Fund 3, which is debt service. Fund 4, and Fund 5. So everything's there. Should you like to look at the over-unders, just one word of warning on the revenue side. Revenues are presented as a negative. They're not really negative, it's just that's how they're presented. So don't let that concern you. Okay, any questions? All right.
As usual, beyond thorough. The next thing is budget review.
Okay. So I did communicate with you yesterday, I believe, some pretty intense news that we received from our auditor's office. I copied that memo. I want to touch on that briefly just because that is a developing situation. So while I'm presenting you these numbers tonight, I had a good conversation with the state auditor's office yesterday. We probably talked for about 20 minutes. And I was hoping that she would be able to get me confirmation on the tax rate figure projections that I sent her, plus some recoupments that she and I have been working on for the last couple of months. All of that work was ground to a screeching halt just maybe a month ago, as that court case, Blankenship versus Franklin County, was decided in the Court of Appeals. Essentially, we're allowed to adjust our tax rate ceiling up based on, so that it will realize about the same amount of revenue as it would at the time that the voters approved it. So it usually adjusts 10 cents up or down over the course of the years. Our last community approved, voter approved tax levy was in 2016. So we did have a couple of years where our tax rate was adjusted above that tax rate ceiling. And there was a provision in the Missouri statute that governs such things that allows us as a taxing authority to do that. Well, that provision was just struck down, which meant that they had to go all the way back to 2016 and in some school districts all the way back to 2009 and recalculate the tax rates moving forward. Doing that particular exercise is relatively standard. If there's let's say there's an abatement in the prior year that affects our assessed valuations, we have to go back and recalculate our rates based on that abatement. And sometimes that lands in our favor on the revenue side, sometimes it doesn't. Well, this one didn't land in our favor at all. It drastically reduced our commercial tax levy, and it reduced our residential tax levy by about 3 cents. So what's really killing us there is the commercial side of our tax levy. I do have a little bit of recoupment in there. Another statute allows us to go back and reclaim lost revenue due to closed state tax commission cases. So we did have some cases that were closed in recent years. So I was going back to try and reclaim some of that lost revenue. And that's when Jill at the state auditor's office let me know that she had to stop and recalculate the entire state's tax rates. So that's where we're at. I am showing a bit of a decrease on the tax revenue side, at least on the operating side. So I expect as we get closer to tax rate season, things will look a little bit different than they do tonight. I'm always uncomfortable presenting numbers to you that I haven't fully vetted. It's just given the time ranges involved here, she and I have not been able to connect to make sure that what I submitted was accurate. I'm mostly confident that it is, but I always like to have the auditor's office look at what I've done or what one in my office has done before we bring those out. So I tentatively present to you the 2022 fiscal year budget. I think that this is a good budget. And after everything I said, all things considered, I do believe that with us bringing back our fee-based services, preschool, Discover Club, and also our sales to students on our food service program, our school nutrition services, those are significant portions of our revenue budgets, and they don't quite offset the expenses, but they almost do, as Ward's been approved a slight increase to the Discover Club and preschool revenues. That was a pretty big hole in our revenue this year, and the expenses stayed, which was the right decision. But when you look at things on paper for this year, those are some of those things that were dramatically affected by those decisions. So as we go into the next year, you're going to see some pretty violent swings when it comes to these revenues, because we wrote them all off and now we're putting them all back in. So when it comes to purchase services, we'll spend a lot more money in fiscal 21 than we did in 22. So like we talked when we reviewed this in the work session, it's more accurate. It's a more realistic look at the prior fiscal year, at fiscal year 20, and then skip 21 and look at 22, like we all wish we could skip 2020, right? And that will give you a more true example of what the budget growth or decline has been over those years. So we've already talked about the AV growth, residential's up, commercial's up, personal property's down, which I haven't quite put my finger on, but we're assuming that merchants and manufacturers was down too, which sadly I believe was some businesses selling off some of their capital asset. We have our sales tax. This is what we budgeted. We're budgeting a $38,000 increase in sales tax, which all things considered, as businesses are coming back online, I think is a good number. I hope that we're going to do quite a bit better than that. Basic formula, all things considered, this is a slight increase. One of the things we noticed on the enrollment side is we're not quite sure of what our preschool enrollment is going to be, just because I think some folks didn't realize that they needed to re-enroll, and we've just got some of that going on. We're cleaning all that up, and I'm sure it'll be fine by the time school starts. When we look at local revenue, one thing that we are adding capacity to our preschool. So we added another 20 seats, and we did that, 2020 being what it was, we had to put a bit of a pause on some of our plans, but some of those plans continued forward, which was the addition of the ECC cottage, which allowed us to add capacity to not only our Discover Club program, but also our preschool. Our preschool won't be meeting over there, but we've been able to move other programs that were in the ECC proper over to the cottage, which freed up classroom space in the ECC for more space. So we are able to serve more of our community's preschool students, which is fantastic. This is the first time that I've been doing this, that we haven't had a wait list. Cindy's confident that we will, Dr. Heemenstreit that is confident that we will be able to get those seats full by the start of the next school year. If not, we have another strategy that we can discuss with you as we get closer. So that will be a slight revenue increase for us on that side that will be very welcomed. And remember that we sold those couple houses over there on Burgess. So when you see non-current revenue, that's what that is. Graphical look at the revenue budget. Positions are as what we've discussed, adding the social worker, the PLTW teacher at the high school, the ECC transition coordinator, and that preschool, half-time preschool teacher, because we're adding that home space that I just talked about, which I think I failed to mention the last time we had budget conversations. All right, we still are projecting salary increases, as you see here. Luckily, a number of our positions will be offset by the federal dollars. ESSER 2 and 3 is what I should have said here. So we'll be able to offset those by those federal revenues. And all of the increases that you see in support staff and administrator salaries, except for a few that you know about, are subject to that 2.75% increase. Benefits, we've talked about this. We talk about this all the time. We are at that top tier in our insurance trust, which means we get the highest rate increase, which is 7.5%. I feel that we are at that point where I'll probably need to start having some very heart-to-heart conversations with our insurance trust on what that looks like. We continue to absorb. This year was 7.5. Prior year, I think, was that 14-something%. I mean, it was an absolutely ridiculous number. And I just need to make sure that when we move forward, that we're able to provide our workers, teachers, et cetera, with the same quality of care, and that we're not bearing the brunt of someone else's burden on the insurance side. So again, I'll be having those conversations as we come into the fall. CBTF will probably be involved in some of those conversations as well. So purchase services on the expenditure side are higher than typical. You saw in 21, so that skews everything. We talked about that. We will be offsetting $100,000, and that'll be for some of the what do we call it? The learning recovery and virtual options that we have available, such as mocap. Supplies, again, they're decreasing significantly, which looks amazing, except we just had increased them significantly in the current year so that we could get our kiddos and workers back on campus safely. Capital outlay, we have, I think we're doing a really good job on capital outlay. We've been able to decrease that because we've been able to roll some of those infrastructure projects that have been plaguing us over the years. As we've been chipping away at them, we've been able to just, through the generosity of our voters and Prop E, we've been able to take care of those. If you haven't driven in front of the high school, yeah, if you do, you'll see all the windows being replaced. It's quite a sight. It's actually kind of cool because when they pull that old window out, you can see the old window frame in there from when this building was built, and it's kind of neat to see. The debt, this is a very fixed item in our budget, and we will be unfortunately, because we're at the beginning of our amortization schedule, a lot of this debt payment is going to be in the form of interest, not principal, this coming year. That's important to note. Okay, so this is what that all looks like. And again, it's a wacko number because of the bond fund. So those are numbers that we typically don't see. And we are budgeting those capital expenditures, but those are, for the most part, for our Prop E projects. I'll pause just briefly. One of the things that I've been noticing here in the last couple of months is I've been working very closely with buildings and grounds facilities. We are building in some replacement of some equipment that's become aged over the years that needs to be replaced. Otherwise it breaks. So we're trying to become a little bit more proactive, and we're budgeting to replace a significant number of our heat pumps in the high school. We had at least 2, maybe 3 go out this year, and they all came in at the same time. So that means if 2 or 3 went out this year, how many more are we going to lose next year? So we've budgeted in to replace the ones that are giving us the most trouble right now. And there's a couple of other items that on the facility side that we're making sure to budget in so that we can get a little bit of a head start on a revised capital improvement plan, 5-year capital improvement plan. So those are all things that we're working on, and those are reflected in the capital outlay budgets. And one that I'm actually really excited about, because I watch how hard these folks work, and we need to make sure that we're keeping our facilities up and in good operational state. So when it comes to the expenditure side, $27.6 on just the operating. This is the one that I always use. This is the one that's the most readable. So you can see we are deficit spending. Let's call this a scheduled spend down of our fund balances. And that's due to the decline the decrease in our tax rate. I was really excited because I had found a way to get us where that number didn't have the brackets around it. So I was a little disappointed, but we will, one thing that I hold on to, I guess, in this job, I take responsibility for these numbers in front of you, is that we, at least since I've been doing this, we beat our budget. We outperform our budget. And I'll share that with you in July when we have the exact numbers, but I anticipate that we'll be outperforming our fiscal 21 year budget significantly. I don't have reason to think that we will necessarily achieve that same level of performance in the fiscal 22 year, but as tightly as we run this ship here, I feel like we have a really good chance at doing that. So I expect that these numbers won't look as they do now as we are having this conversation next year. All right, so I believe that I probably did not delete this in my haste. So we made the final edits to the budget document today, and we are presenting this budget for your approval now. And tomorrow we will verify all of our numbers and roll the budgets over, and we'll be working on that for the next couple of days. So I'll turn the expense budgets over to the building principals and their assistants and the directors and their assistants to start writing purchase orders for the coming year.
Thank you, Chris, for that very detailed report.
You want more?
No. No, thank you so much.
I do have a quick question, Brandy, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Chris, thank you for that. I do think, to your point earlier, that, we don't have to decide on this now, but kind of the going forward for us to help manage this, the budget for this upcoming fiscal year will look more like the budget from 2 fiscal years ago, I guess. And so like when we get reporting and stuff like that, comparing it to last year could be in certain categories not as useful or complete anomalies, right? So I just, and as treasurer, I'm happy to work with you to talk about this and figure out how we can see and track how we're doing as it relates to maybe, there's going to be some things, I think, because of COVID that are going to be with us for a long time. So I don't want to pretend like COVID's over and we're going to compare it to a non-COVID year. But I do think like we should have some canaries in the coal mine around certain categories and certain areas as we present the information. And last year's budget or actual numbers are not necessarily always going to be super useful. Not again in every category. So I'm sure you've thought about this, but as you know, it could be a ton more amendments coming. It could be a ton more things. The more we can get ahead of that and in front of that, as you've always done, I'm and without overwhelming you or us with 80-page Excel documents or whatever, I think that would be helpful, right? Just kind of figuring it out from a staff standpoint. And, I guess maybe focusing on the big numbers, where are we going to see the biggest swings and how does this compare to what we are normally experiencing and from a budget standpoint? Because I I totally appreciate how uncomfortable it is to be in your shoes right now in terms of some of the changes coming through as we switch fiscal years. I'm very confident in this budget, but we just got to figure out a way to manage it effectively for all of us.
Yeah, and one of the things, Francis, I welcome that conversation. I do have a couple of thoughts. I've talked to some folks that do what I do around town and been looking at some things, and I think there's a way that we can probably we can adjust things a little bit more regularly as we go to keep a truer look at how things are going. So I'm not always having to say to you, it's timing, this will get cleaned up next month. You know, that's not necessarily the position that I like to be in either. I think a lot of the narrative aspect, I think we can take care of in our financial statements, just as a reminder, like I did with you this evening. Fiscal 21 was an anomalous year. The more accurate look is 20, but remembering as our enrollments, I'm hoping, are plateauing right now, we can still expect to see some growth in the following areas, you know, staffing, purchase service supplies, staffing being our greatest expense. That's where the majority of our cash outlay is. And as long as we're able to balance our cash inflows and outflows, I think we're going to be in good shape. I think one of the things that's important for me and also you as the board to remember is I can make cuts to purchase services and supplies all day long, but that's really not going to move the needle but a nudge, just because of the staffing numbers are so large, the salaries and benefits. And that's not an indictment. That's just the way that goes. So when we talk programmatically about where our money is, you know, the middle school is Expedition. That's not the cheapest program in the world. But the board and the community has placed enough value in that we leave that alone. To cut that would not gain us anything. So when we have these programmatic conversations and further work sessions, or when whatever form the board decides, those are the types of conversations we can have. Where is that growth coming from, and where can we balance those outflows?
Yeah, and I think that's useful for us to also think about, like, where can we further invest, right, going forward. So it's comparing us to what we've done, but it's also giving us the idea and the runway to sort of say, we need more social work resources, we need more, you know, whatever that looks like. You know, we've had pretty consistent year-to-year kind of comparisons. It's just going to be a little weird to kind of skip over one and have, you know, what I'm sure is going to be, you know, bumps even in this fiscal year, you know, depending on how our revenue programs can go and all of that stuff. So I just wanted to kind of say that publicly, and, you know, I'm sure you'll be on top of it, but, you know, we might have some extra finance duties to do this year.
Well, I'll make sure I stay close to you, Francis. I feel like perhaps we'll be drinking some coffee together soon. So
sounds good.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Chris. Okay, I think we're moving on to action items. The first is the MSD maintenance agreement. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the MSD maintenance agreement as presented.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Second.
Motion carries.
Aye.
Warrant list. Our final warrant list.
I move to approve the FY20 final warrant list as presented.
Second.
Thank you. And I believe we had all those in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Any abstentions? Thank you,
I
Maria.
abstain.
Okay, moving on to the final budget amendment. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the FY21, I think it should be, final budget amendment as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Fiscal year 2022 budget approval.
Move to approve the fiscal year 2022 budget as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries.
Aye.
I think we're ready for adjournment. Does anybody have anything else before we do so? Anybody ready to go?
Thank
Yes,
you.
Yeah,
yes,
thank
Chris,
you,
thank you
Chris.
so much.
Quite welcome.
I
Second.
move to adjourn the meeting.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.